All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Health Tips for Life. I get like a lockdown here. Anyway, so excited to be with you on a Monday conversation with the Dr. Stewart. It's an interesting topic that we're going to be covering today. And by the way, guys, I wanted to give you a heads up how we intend to move forward with this. Now, we're going to enter into some conversations about some very heavy topics. And it's very hard to cover that in one time. So, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to do it in two-part segments. For example, let's just say topic A. We're going to do, for example, in part one, we're going to do the causes and so forth. And in part B, we're going to do how to manage that case, whatever that might be. And this is what we intend to do today with this topic. We're going to address today the causes and the effects of all this. Then next week, and I already had a conversation with Dr. Stewart, and he's okay with this, that we can do this one in this way. This way, you guys get the most out of it because it's very complicated topics and so forth. In the meantime, for the videos, I will be doing videos related to this kind of topics, especially when it comes down to the nutrition aspects of it. I started with few spices and so forth. Now we're going to move into, for example, we moved briefly into fruits, and I'm going to move into veggies and so forth. All this is going to be objectively tied to what we talk about. So this way you get a full benefit about what we are talking about. So today we're going to be talking about, I know you all heard about ADD, the attention deficit disorder. And mainly a lot of people associate this with kids. Well, not necessarily, especially with what Dr. Stewart has to share with us, knowing that he has over 3 or 4 decades experience with this. It's not about just kids. That can touch on all young adults and even including C-level executives. And believe it or not, I was surprised to find that. So let's bring in Dr. Stewart here, and we'll start our conversation.
Hello, Dr.
Doc.
O. Boy, am I happy to be with you today. This is...
I can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Still no sound.
Here we go. I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Okay. This is one of my favorite topics. I can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. So let me make sure here because I have my mic on. There we go.
Okay.
You still can hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
I can hear you
That's
perfectly.
We're good to go. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. And what we're really talking about today, I've spent the majority of my career working with. That's more than 35 years of dedication to loss of focus and what that really means to people. And we decided to call this thing lost in distraction. Lack of focus may hinder your path to success. And my God, is that the truth? I have spent more than 35 years successfully dealing with human beings who have a focus issue. And that means children, because I used to work in a classroom. I'm a certified teacher. And young adults, because I worked at colleges and universities in the counseling center. And then I spent a number of years inside corporations with management and C-level executives. That's the top group inside any corporation. And how terrible this lack of focus is. We can call it ADD, ADHD, attention deficit, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
But what we have is people who have significantly hindered or significantly affected careers based on their inability to focus and get the job done in either a timely way or an efficient way.
Well, first, let's break this stuff down so we can at least have, at least for me personally, to have a basic understanding. I don't know what it is. When people tell me, well, I can focus and I kind of don't get it. It's because you're either focused to get a task done or you don't.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm simplifying this too much.
This is really complicated, and I'm glad we have this week and next week to really talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you start talking about how profoundly does this affect someone's career or their personality or their overall life,
Mm-hmm.
it's a big deal. And we're going to go into that in some detail after we go into what it looks like. Here's a guess for anyone who's watching this. What percentage of the population has this focus problem? And I'm going to ask people to guess right now and write it down. And then I'm going to tell people what it is. And then I'm going to give you all, we'll discuss what this actually looks like. Do I have it? Do I have the symptoms? And then I'm going to ask you to reassess what percentage of the population has this.
Wow.
So let's have some fun with this.
Yeah, why not?
Make a guess, right?
Yeah, if you guys can type in what percentage do you think that is, I'll just put it on in a chat box here, and we'll see. And Dr. Stewart will explain to us later on. Well, there is one guess here, 25%.
Oh, that's a good guess. It's wrong, but it's a good guess.
Good guess, Phil. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Wow, interesting. So how does it happen?
Well, maybe we could talk about what the symptoms are so people can tell if they have it or not.
Okay.
And oh my God, are there a lot of symptoms? I've listed 24 that I personally have observed because I've actually dealt with probably 2,500 people over the course of my career directly who have this problem. And when I was in the schools, they said, we have 3% of the population has this. And then I was working in the classroom and I laughed out loud at their low numbers. Cut me a break. So when you're the person who's dealing directly with it, you get a very different view from some administrator some places. Oh, it's a small problem. It's a huge problem. And let me give you some of the, maybe we could talk about some of the symptoms here, and you can relate how you've seen these kinds of things. For one thing, people are impulsive. And instead of thinking about what they're doing, they just do it, no matter what the consequence is, because the prefrontal cortex is not giving them good information about, hey, there's a consequence to this. They frequently don't have any kind of calculation for the consequence or what the future tense is. Have you ever seen that, Dr. O?
Well, to a degree, but usually I see it with teens, with teenagers. They don't think of consequences, but it still, to me, was like, how can one do that? Despite maturity here. And that's what I'm trying to understand. What is the link there or regarding the brain structure? Why aren't they able to think through before making decisions or acting on something?
This part of your brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, most information runs through that thing, and it monitors that information, and it helps you make decisions. No, it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But if that thing is not turned on and you're not fully awake, you're not going to get the quality information. Here's a test I used to give people. No, this is what I used to do for parents. I'd say, your child has this, or your teenager has it, or your young adult has it, and I'd like to show you what it's like. And I'd hold up something for them to read. I'd say, now blink like this, as fast as you can, and read what's on the page. And they would stumble and bumble, and they couldn't do it very well. Matter of fact, I invite everyone in our audience to do this trick after the show is over. And so you get to see if this thing called the prefrontal cortex is blinking on and off, which is what lack of focus is, you might only get half or a third of the information coming in. How on earth are you supposed to make a good decision when you're doing this all the time?
Oh,
And it goes, well, hold it. You mean that they can't see it the way we do? No, they don't see it the way we see it. They're seeing glimpses of it, but not the whole, they're not seeing the whole picture. You say, well, what about hearing? It's the same. And you say, well, these people, they don't really listen. It's because they can't. It's not because they
Is that
don't want
because
to.
yeah, is that because there is neurological issues there, or something is not right?
For sure, something is not right. And when later on, when we go into all the causes of this,
Yeah.
you'll see just how really complicated it is. But let me give you a word here. There's hope. 25 years ago, we were running very successful programs to help people, no matter what age they were, overcome this issue. I'll give you a concrete example. 64-year-old woman comes in and she says, I'm not dumb, doctor. Honest, I'm not dumb, but I can't read. We put her through a treatment program, which we'll talk about next week. And in 6 weeks, she picked up a book and started crying and said, this is easy. I can read this book perfectly. And she did out loud for us at age 64, never having been able to read before. Wow. The solutions have been here for a long time. Guess what? They're ignored. Let me give you some more examples of what the symptoms are like. Do you ever see somebody who's just totally disorganized, and they have problems prioritizing what they should do next? Yeah. I've seen a lot of those. Matter of fact, I still see them.
Yeah, that's what they call in French language, they call l'embarras du choix. When you have a hard time prioritizing which one to do first. And
there you see, if the prefrontal cortex is not working right, you're blinking or hearing going on and off. How on earth are you supposed to know what to do? For one thing, you're not getting the full information. What about people with poor time management? Ever see any of them? That seems to be more the rule than the exception. You ever see people who can't multitask? That's a lot of people. And you say, well, isn't that just a male thing? No, it's a problem with brain function.
But I did hear this argument, Doug, that females are much better at multitasking than males.
Unless they have this focusing issue, and then they're just as bad as the worst men.
Oh, okay.
And they're scattered all over. But by and large, it's true.
Yeah.
And you take a look evolutionarily, women had to multitask. They had to cook, they had to take care of the children, they had to manage their men, they had to socialize with all the other women to keep the society going. Men had one major focus: bring home the meat. That's made very simple, but that's really the main focus.
Yeah. But also, could it be also that when people are having a hard time prioritizing, they just don't know the right, okay, I have task A and I have task B. I'm having a hard time to choose because I never developed a process by which to evaluate where do I give the priority to.
That's a perfect example. And you say, well, how come they didn't develop them? Because one of the consequences of this focusing problem is people don't develop confidence in themselves. They see themselves making terrible mistakes over and over and over again. And of course, the reality is people give them feedback about you're dumb, or you're lazy, or you're stupid. And they start incorporating that, and then they act more and more that way. They don't understand that it's a focusing issue, not there's something tragically wrong with them or they're dumb. I can't tell you how many times. Yes, I can. It's a couple of hundred times where we would work with the young person who had this focusing issue. We'd fix the problem, and they went from the biggest troublemaker in the class to now the teacher saw them in a very different light because they were now performing at the right level. And how many times they became the teacher's favorite student because they came out of the fog and now actively participated in their own education. And the first time we saw it, we almost cried, but after a while we began to expect that these young people are really going to pull out of it. once we did the right things.
Mm.
By the way, these treatment programs have been around for at least 50 years. My favorite one has been around for 70 years and still almost not used.
So
Going,
that means it's effective if it's still around.
It's highly effective.
Okay.
And when we talk about what to do about it, people are going to be able to do this at home themselves.
Yeah.
This is a very exciting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Doc.
This is a very exciting field to be in because there are real solutions. And boy, next week we're going to show people just exactly what to do.
Yeah. I was going to just say, was a comment from John Gilia mentioned that could this be affiliated with being hungry, poor quality of sleep, stressed, or distracted by something in your environment?
This guy's got it right on. We'll hit all of those.
Interesting.
If you're yawning all the time, you're not going to be able to focus. I mean, we keep hitting how important sleep is. Yeah. It is paramount to everything that you get quality sleep.
Yeah.
You know, one of the main things about sleep is, one of the many main things is, while you sleep, your brain takes all the stimulus for the day, starts codifying it, and starts storing it in various other places, so you get to keep it as a memory. If you don't sleep well, you're forgetful because the information that you took in during the day went away because it was not processed, not put into storage.
Interesting.
And hardly anyone talks like that to give people good information about the critical importance of sleep. But let's not go down that place right now because we got so much else to talk about. Another thing is, people with ADHD or this focusing issue typically are easily frustrated and highly emotional. It's really something to talk to somebody, and I've done this a couple of hundred, well, I don't know how many times over a long career. You talk to them and you start realizing this person is smart. How come they act so dumb? And so, me being who I am, I'd say, you know, you show up as pretty dumb. Is that how you really are? And they'd say, I'm really smart. I can't figure out how come I act this way. I just can't grab hold of, I keep shaking my head as if I need to wake up. That's what they'd say to me. Of course, shaking their head didn't wake them up because the prefrontal cortex was not working right. And they were going through this blinking thing, either auditorily or visually. And so in their frustration, they would yell, they'd be angry, they would cry. You say, I know I'm not dumb, I just know it. But they couldn't control it. And that's why these treatment programs were so hopeful.
Interesting.
Because they can't pay attention correctly, they often look like they're emotionally uncaring. Because they can't see what's going on. They can't empathize with somebody who they're getting 1/3 of the information about what the other person's experience is. And so, what do you think make a guess what's their social connections like?
Disconnected?
Disconnected. They are disconnected. And so people they care less and less about them because they say, they don't care about me, I'm not going to care about them. And it's not that they want to be that way.
Yeah.
They can't be that way because they can't pay attention well enough. And sometimes when they're talking, you swear they're incoherent because they can't pay attention. Let me say it differently. Many people have it so that they have their brain creates what they're going to say, but before they can get it all out, they forgot it because they lost their focus. And they say, I forgot what I was saying. Or you hear them, they get in the middle of a sentence and they go, where was I going with that? That's not supposed to happen. The human brain is designed to deliver complete messages, not forget in the middle. And then you start taking a look at, do they make careless mistakes? And so you see these people, they're adding up numbers, and they go 7 and 5, 14. Well, no, that's wrong. And if they were really paying attention, they would know that that's the wrong answer, but they can't pay attention long enough.
Mm.
Have you ever talked to somebody who has to read the same paragraph 3 times to remember what it says?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we all know people like that. They say,
Yeah.
I have to keep reading it over and over and over. It's because they can't pay attention long enough to get the full message. So everything they do takes 300% more time because they can't focus.
Well, I do. Hold on a second, Doc. I do that sometimes. I did that throughout my college years. But my reason for it was because of the complexity of the topics.
That's a different story.
Yeah, I couldn't assume just reading it one time, then I got it. So I had to read it twice, sometimes 3 times, because, again, the complexity of the content.
I was trained to speed read, and speed reading for me wasn't 2,000 words a minute. It was 500. And then I said, because I don't read trivial stuff. I read complex scientific journals. I read complex books. And I read things that you need to think about to get what's going on, to get what the real message is. So my rule is I pick up something and read it, and then I read it in its entirety. Then I go back and read it in bits and pieces. I don't have an attention problem. What I have is the stuff I'm reading is dense.
I see.
So it's not like that's a problem. That's the nature of it if you're having to deeply understand it. So I wouldn't confuse that kind of experience with an attention problem.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So we're seeing a bunch of careless mistakes, and it's because they can't focus on the issue long enough. You start getting, this is pretty serious stuff. And so at this point, with here's the critical one. They can't follow instructions. They just can't follow instructions, because if you can't hear them, or your vision is jumbled and you can't see them, how on earth are you supposed to follow them? And that's one of the things that teachers and managers really got the most frustrated with. Because no matter how carefully they explain things, guess what? The person couldn't follow through because they never got it to begin with. If you get 3/4 of the instructions and miss 25%, and it's an important project, you should be in trouble. Because you're not going to get it right. And so you can see how people's education process is profoundly hurt. You can see that their ability to produce on the job is profoundly affected. And at this point, I'd like to invite people to guess again as to what percentage of the population has this problem.
Yeah.
And see if anybody responds to it.
Yeah. We had Phil earlier saying 25%. So let's see. Can you guys guess? If you can type it on the chat box, just put a number there, whatever your guess is. So
I can tell you what we found in the schools when I was in the classroom. The school administration said it's 3%, and the mental health people said it was 10%. Only real world, it was 50%.
Whoa!
You go.
Wow!
Wow. So from across all economic strata, and it was the same no matter whether you were wealthy, whether you were middle class, or whether you were poor, it was 50%. So now we're looking at productivity of human beings in the United States. You say, hold it, you mean that 50% of the population is in some severely diminished capacity in terms of production in their own life? Yes. So it means, how worthwhile are they on the job? Well, very diminished. How much income are they going to earn? Significantly less. How can you rely on those people to do a good job? You can't. You have to put extra supervisors and managers in place to make sure they actually do the job. And as you know, Dr. O, I was in more than 100 companies,
Yeah.
and this problem was like rampant. It doesn't matter whether it's a major corporation or what. I got to see how unproductive half their employees were, and what the real cost was. So if you say, well, how much more do things cost because of this? And you say, what if it's 25%? What if it's 20%? The cost what you pay at the store is probably 20 to 25% higher than it should be if people didn't have this focus issue. Going, that's huge. I mean, just huge. And you start rolling this out in terms of the consequences. Well, we know that the manufacturing giants of the world now are in other countries.
Now the 50%.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And so you start seeing how this impacts every one of us all day, every day, in terms of the competency of the people we're dealing with.
Wow.
And you go, okay, so what does that mean in terms of what I pay for groceries? Well, they're 25% higher. What does it mean in terms of if the nurse who's dealing with me has this issue? Then we take a look at medical statistics and we see how many nurses get the prescription wrong, especially for things like morphine and other kinds of really dangerous drugs. And we see that there's this huge death rate from these people. Now, they pretty well cover it up because they have to, because you have to have some faith in somebody. But the consequences of this are outrageous in terms of the impact on all of our lives.
Now, the 50 the number you got, that one based on the research for how long? Was it like the last 20 years, 25? Something like that?
The research says it's a small problem. But I'm not, I'm in the trenches, you know. I'm dealing with these people and being paid to make them effective or select them out of the pool of employees. And, you know, as I talk to my colleagues, they all agree with me. Every other teacher, you know, I'd say, well, you know, in your classroom, how many kids would you say are, in your high school kids, how many? And they'd say, about half. What does that mean in terms of the efficiency of teaching? And here's the kicker. I used to have a close friend who ran a private school, and she said to me, over the last 10 years, we've had to dumb down the curriculum 20%. The kids are so unfocused and other problems that we can't teach at the same high level we did even 20 years ago. We've dumbed it down that much, and it's getting worse. I'm going, okay, I got it.
Yeah. I was going to ask for the 50%. Are we talking kids, adults, and C-level? Or are we talking
C-level isn't as near as bad. They're pretty well screened out. Although I got to tell you, I used to, when I was doing a lot of this, companies hired me to do things like they needed a new CEO and they narrowed it to 3 candidates. They'd have me come in and do a complete evaluation on each one of the 3 of them. And here's what I found. This is generally not every single time, but it happened more often than not. So it's more than 50%. One of the candidates clearly had a focusing issue and was clearly not qualified for the CEO position. And I secretly thought they're not qualified for management. How did they get here? But they got there and I interviewed them. The second person was marginally qualified, frequently didn't want the job, but they were only marginal anyway. And the third candidate had no focus issue at all, was real clear and very productive. And I did it over and over and over again, and it kept coming up the same way. But at C-level executives, it was rare, except when they made a mistake hiring. I'll give you an example of one of those. I did a lot of work for this company, and they really liked what I was doing. And the CEO said, "Would you evaluate my executive staff? I would really like to see," because I used to do something, I'd write the book on somebody. That is, here's the manual for how to manage this person and get the most out of them and have the communication be really good. And I interviewed this one guy and said, "This guy can't focus, and he's in a CFO position." And he said, "Okay, think about that a second. This is the guy that's in charge of all the numbers and all the compliance with federal regulations." And I went and told the CEO, and he said, "Really?" 3 weeks later, this guy did something so heinous that the entire executive team was fired because of his incompetence. So we do see these people do really get to some very responsible positions. And I have to say, if the way that people get ahead is to kiss up as opposed to show merit, these people are frequently pretty good at kissing up because they've had to. Because
that's the problem we have in this country.
I completely agree.
I look at it. I used to work in Washington, so I look at it like the higher ups. We deal with them sometimes, and you realize the higher ups have no clue about the culture, the language, understanding the history, and so forth, and yet they are in possession of making decisions. That's like what we see right now with the foreign policy establishment.
Yes,
they are amateurs. They are not qualified statement or individuals with that kind of caliber that have a better understanding of what the geopolitical landscape, for example, is all about. They just don't know.
And so you have to ask yourself, how is it possible? What are these people? What goes on with these people in terms of input of obvious information? Are they ignoring it purposefully? The scary part is, well, I don't know what, it's all scary, but they're not. My experience of them is they're not going out of their way to ignore these situations. They actually don't see it. You say, how's that possible? Well, if the prefrontal cortex is not giving them the full story, they're going to continue to act stupid and make horrible recommendations and make terrible decisions.
Yeah. Did you notice the difference between male and female when you were doing this? Was there a big difference?
Not actually. There was a way men and women generally process information differently. And I'll give you an example of this because it's important to know the difference so you don't get confused with it. Because focusing people are typically messy, and they don't follow a sequence in terms of accomplishing anything. Matter of fact, they have trouble accomplishing. But men typically say, here's where I want to go, and here's where I am. Now, what's step one? And they go through step one, followed by step two, which is built on step one, step three, which is built on step two, step four, and then exit because they've accomplished the goal. And there are any number of people, it's primarily women, who do something called mosaic thinking. And amazingly, their results are just as good. But it goes, okay, step four. Hold it, that's not where you start. Step two, step five, step one, step three, call exit because I've accomplished it. And the first time I watched somebody do this, I was just astonished. I couldn't believe they did it. And so I started paying attention to how many people are actually mosaic thinkers. It's a lot. And it's primarily women. But they're just as effective as the ones who do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, call exit, and because I've accomplished the goal.
Interesting stuff. I got two statements or comments here from two of our viewers. I'm going to post them here because we all can see. HZ said, I strongly believe there is a correlation between widespread internet accessibility, microwave frequency via mobile devices, and influence to mental focus. What do you
I
think,
believe
Doug?
him. I believe him. We might go to the direction of what are the causes of this, because
Mhm.
that's where he went. Looking at a flickering screen, what do you think that does to the brain? Here's the nut of that one. A successful channel of any
Mhm.
kind is, whether it's a video game or whether it's whatever, if it's YouTube or whatever, they're the most successful shows or the most successful presentations or games have to do with manipulating brain chemistry. You go, what? And amazingly, they've hired some really good biochemists and psychologists to say, if you can get a presentation to stimulate dopamine production in the brain, you've got an audience for life.
Wow.
They'll play your game or they'll watch your stuff for hours at a time, because dopamine is an instant pleasure neurotransmitter. And you play it and you feel good, and you play it and you feel good, you play it and you feel good, and you start wearing out your ability to produce enough. And so you start feeling bad. So you play the game some more, you watch more of whatever it is.
Hmm.
So, and these guys have known this, these manufacturers of these games and so on have known this for a very long time. And so you say, well, here's really schools, jobs, and so on have to compete with these games and these shows that are so rich in producing dopamine. No job that you go to is going to give you the brain dump of dopamine to make you feel good
Hmm.
that these games or these presentations are going to do.
But could
And
it
so
be also, yeah, but could it be also the fulfillment from that job? There are people that go to work, but they hate their job. They don't like it.
that's most people. Yeah. And there are people who they do get that kind of a rush on the
Hmm.
job.
Hmm.
And you say, well, how come people crave power so much? Well, I don't wonder. If you could boss other people around and they will go, yes, sir, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. Yes, ma'am. What does the person receive? They get a dopamine rush.
Hmm.
It's the power over others, and it's built into us biologically. And I've watched over many years people who get any kind of authority take advantage of it to boss other people around or manipulate their lives. And going, okay, I understand the chemistry. I do get it.
That's what we're seeing in Washington right now.
I see that. Yeah, it's horrible.
It is. It is.
Well, maybe we could spend, I mean, our time is running out rapidly. Maybe we
Okay.
could spend some time talking about what causes this.
Sure. And I want just to get to one comment here, if I may, Doug. I want to share it on the screen. John Gelia wrote, some believe dyslexic or dyslexia may have a part in not focusing. Is there some truth to that?
Oh, let's go there. Oh, that's a wonderful comment. Let's talk about dyslexia. Because I saw this over and over and over and over again. And then when I got trained into what to do about it, it went away. Let me explain to people what dyslexia is. You're looking at a line of print, and your eyes start jumping all around in the line because you can't focus on the specific words one at a time. And then you say, will you raise your, I'm going to raise my left hand. I'm going to say, would you raise your right hand? Going, no, that's your left hand. Okay, well, now raise your left hand. Then raise the right hand. You say, well, how can you tell the difference? And you say, I can't. I don't know left from right. You go, well, If you don't know left from right, how are you going to read from left to right? How are you going to pay attention or if you can't tell up and down? How are you going to do numbers when you have to add or subtract or multiply or divide? If the numbers keep jumping around, you go, well, there is a solution for that. And I'm going to tell you what the underlying mechanism is. And next week we'll go into some detail about the solution.
Great.
Here's what it is. You have to be able to differentiate your head from your shoulders. You go, what? It's all in the neck and the developmental of being able to cross these kind of directions. And if you developmentally didn't go through creeping and crawling correctly or lifting your head correctly, you've got dyslexia.
Wow.
And how many weeks does it take to fix that? 2, 3, 4. But you got to do it every day, these exercises, which we'll talk about next week.
Interesting.
So there's this whole, it's like it's a life-changing event when you get this remedied. There are a number of brain exercises that really expand your ability to think and produce. And we'll talk about those with some detail next week also. Let's go to poor diet.
All right. I'm sure it has something to do with it.
Oh, it has a lot to do with
it. For sure.
Okay, let's have sugary cereal for breakfast.
Oh.
And so an hour and a half after you have that, your blood sugar drops. And you go, I don't feel so good. And and you can't focus well because you're tired, because your blood sugar is too low, because it's spiked about 45 minutes after you ate all that sugary, short chain carbohydrate stuff. The cortisol came in from your adrenal glands and regulated the sugar, but it over-regulated it and took it down below where it's supposed to be, and you can't think.
Wow.
Here's the prediction that the teachers would make. It was because all you had to do is open your eyes, you'd see it. We could tell when a child had a quality breakfast. That is eggs, meat, vegetables, whatever. Because at 10:30 they could still perform. But the kids who had either no breakfast or had an apple strudel Pop-Tart or whatever it was, at 10:30 they'd phase out because they couldn't stop the fatigue of low blood sugar. And it was really, I mean, there'd be a class of 40 kids, and what you see is 30 of them checked out. Well, this is a problem. Now, that was a form of attention deficit, but it was caused by poor diet. It still is a problem. And if you're going to phase out for a couple of hours in the middle of the day and you're working, what does that mean in terms of your productivity or your effectiveness or your ability to make mistakes and get things correct? It makes a big difference. And how many stories do we have to hear about somebody who phased out at the wrong time and a tragedy occurred? Right. Let's go to toxic exposure because many years ago, people used to use paint that had lead in it. And little kids would chew on the woodwork. They'd chew on things because they're teething, and their jaws hurt. And they'd chew on something because it helped. Now, if they chewed on something that had lead content in it, it permanently damaged their brain. You're going, oh my God. Now, because that stuff is still around, the lower the economic status of a person, of the family, the more they're exposed to old buildings and old homes where that lead is still viable. I mean, it's still used. It's not in the new paint, but it's the old paint. Let's talk about putting mercury amalgams in your mouth because you have a dental cavity. The mercury leaks out. And I saw some very instructive films where they put one molecule of mercury with live neurons in the brain. When that neuron touched the mercury, it went and shrunk and died, killed that arm of the neuron. Instantaneous. It was shocking to see. Then it said, hold it, we're still putting mercury in kids' mouths. And then we wonder why they're dumbing down. Okay. Let's go just a couple more of these, because next week is the happy week where we really talk about what to do about these things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about emotional problems. Okay, Mom, what's the typical American family like today? Well, there's Mom, her children, and stepfather.
Yeah.
That's the typical family. 52% of families don't operate. They're ended in divorce. The next most popular family is Mom and her children. Now, what kind of stresses does that put on children who rarely see their father, or never, or putting up with an unstable home situation? To say the least, they're not getting the full benefit of an intact family, which is the third category and the least common by far. Mom, children, stepchildren, mom alone, and now a mother and father raising their children together. Going, what kind of emotional problems are these kids having? How are they distracted from it? How are they not getting the guidance that they need to, or actually the pressure to perform? That's one of the things dads typically do. They say, no, you're going to do good in school. You're not going to misbehave. You're not going to be a jerk. You're going to behave right. Now they have no guidance and no dimension of structure and discipline. Let me go to one that I marveled at the school district because they did it well. They'd take a problem kid who had ADHD and behavior problems, and the principal would come in and say, kid, you're out. And what he did is put him with a different teacher. The kid started to perform. It was the interaction between the teacher and the child that they just bumped heads like this. And very frequently they got rid of they ended the problem. The first time I saw it, I laughed out loud and say, this can't be true. Then I watched it happen a few times because these people were clever.
Yeah.
And I said, there's got to be a whole lot more to this. I never understood the why, but I understood what. And I saw them being effective, and I said, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Get the job done and be
yeah.
Go ahead.
I wonder if there is a big difference between societies or cultures when it comes down to ADHD, ADD or HDA or ADH.
ADHD, yeah.
ADHD. Yeah.
The only other culture that I got to see up close was in Germany.
Germany, yeah.
And I marveled at the quality of their education. Now, I didn't get to see a big sample of it, but I saw enough sample of it that, because I lived there, and the entire structure is so different. They take the stress off the kids. What they tell them is, you're part of a community. You're part of a culture. We all get along with each other, and we all cooperate to make sure everyone gets ahead. Now, that's said very simply because they have a really complicated education system. Yeah. 3 tiers of where you're going to go, and it's decided real early on in life whether you're going to be a technical worker, whether you're going to be a college, whatever you're going to do. They start dividing kids real early. But what I saw is the amount of stress was dramatically less. And even today, when I visit Germany, the people seem much less stressed than in America. Yeah. And I'm wondering, and I would be interested in seeing their focusing issues and the level of those compared to that in the United States.
Mhm.
So,
Well, the quality of life here. I have family who lives in Europe, and they're
yeah,
scattered all over from Italy, France, Spain, Germany, Holland, England,
yeah,
and all that. And especially not all of them I talk to, but I talk to the main ones in Holland and France, and their lifestyle is quite different. It's very quite different. So anytime I go, uh, they are laid back. So they don't understand why I have to be on the move, because that's just the nature of how our
yeah.
lifestyle here. We have to be in the move. So they said to me one time, "Well, you guys are too stressed out. You Americans are wealthy, but at the same time you don't get a chance to enjoy life." And you know what? They were right. They were right.
They were right about we don't enjoy life, but
No,
they were wrong about what the average income in the Americas in America is.
yeah,
We're a poor country, and people don't know it.
yeah,
You know, when the average income is $31,000 a year, you go, what quality of life can you have in this country with the prices of things on
yeah,
$31,000 a year? It's poor. Let's
yeah.
go to the last category because
Okay.
I don't want to. No, I want to keep this into.
Yeah.
Let's go
Okay.
to prescription drugs.
Whoa.
Oh my God. Let's start with Ritalin and Adderall.
Mm.
Okay, these are stimulants,
Hmm.
and they have the same base as cocaine. What?
Wow.
And the FBI categorized Adderall and Ritalin as kiddie cocaine.
Mm.
30% of prescriptions for these two drugs are sold in the black market as cocaine or as stimulants.
Wow.
Hold it. 30% is they go and get a prescription and they sell it. 30%? Okay. So now we have these brains that are stimulated, highly
Hmm.
stimulated, with what is really a damaging drug. So what happens when you overstimulate the brain? Well, poor decisions, bad decisions. Uh, you for a short time, you're going to fly high. And that's why college kids use these things. They can stay up all night and study for an exam. They didn't bother studying for the rest of the semester, but boy, the night before, they're all doped up and they do real well, or they do adequately. They can stay in college.
Mm.
You say, well, what kind of a lifestyle is it? You're damaging your brain every time you do one of these things. And you'll see, I saw kids that have been on these things for a decade.
Wow.
You say, well, then you try to get them off it. Oh, the withdrawal is murderous.
Mm.
It is with a whole lot of these brain altering medications. The withdrawal would take weeks, and some of them never recovered. Their brains were permanently altered in a very negative way. Your brain makes an adjustment, and the first time I heard it, I gone, oh, does this explain things? Without the drug, without the medication, I can't feel normal again.
Mm.
I lost my ability to be normal. And so they were in some chronic down, because I don't want to call it depression, but they'd say, I just feel down and I can't feel pleasure, I can't feel anything unless I take this stuff. Going 70 years, we've had good solutions.
Hmm.
I've dealt with hundreds of kids and brought them out, and adults, teenagers, college kids, and business people, brought them out of it, and they didn't need a single drug.
Wow.
But where's the money? And some of the things that we were doing back then, I can't even find people who are doing it anymore.
Yeah, because everybody now into medication and everything is medicated. Oh,
So where the money is, I get
that's the
it.
system is. Yeah.
I have a couple of friends that still do these things,
Yeah.
and I take a look at their results. They're not only bringing kids out of ADHD rapidly, they're bringing kids out of autism. Autism isn't what you think it is. But that's an entirely different story. Because we're not talking about autism today. We're talking about lack of focus, what you could call ADHD or whatever you want to call it. But it's clearly the lack of focus, and it's an abnormal brain activity that doesn't allow people to pay attention correctly and all the consequences that come from it. But next week is a lot more positive.
Oh, great. Yeah, we look forward to next week. I'm sure the viewers will have enough, or bring in enough questions. We can answer some questions, or you can answer some questions. You're more qualified than me, of course. I'm not my area. So, but I'm very, very grateful that you carved out time for us here on Mondays. We truly, truly appreciate it. I'm sure the viewers truly appreciate you sharing the knowledge we have. So thank you so much, Dr. Stewart. Truly appreciate it.
I'm really happy to do this.
Okay, well, folks, I hope you guys find this very informative, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Now, next week we're gonna do part 2. As I mentioned to those who might not be at the beginning here, we're gonna be doing this kind of topics in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1, where Dr. Stewart is going to explain to us what is and how to diagnose certain illnesses or conditions. And part B, that's where he's gonna be providing the solutions, and in this case, how to manage or address the ADH, I believe, or ADD, I believe that's what it is. So I look forward to seeing you guys next time. And as always, remember, your health is your best asset. Till next time. Bye-bye.